Greetings friends and welcome to the gameplay guide on how to make waves of enemies. So this is perfect for a survival game or a tower defense, really whatever works for you. A nice way to get groups of enemies coming at different times. Alrighty, so first thing we're going to get is our enemy, which is going to be this blank basic puppet. We can stamp 3 of these dudes down. And to differentiate between them, I'm going to go to coat mode, leave our first one this clay color. Going to make the second one yellow, so this will be our wave 2 enemy, and then for our third one I think I'll make him red. You can also make various edits here, so for example if we're going to go into your second wave and you see that by default your guy will have 100 HP, maybe for your wave 2 guy he'll have 120, you know, so they get a bit stronger and that sort of a thing. Then for your wave 3 guy, maybe you want to make some edits, like you want to make him have even more health. You want to have him having like 140 HP or something. Make sure to remember to make the current health also change so that it's at max. Alrighty, so those are like little things you can edit. So this guy's got 100 health, this guy's got 120, this guy's got 140. Alrighty, so we now have our enemies for each wave. Let's get to the part where we talk about spawning and making them appear. Alrighty, now that we've got our enemies, how are we going to spawn them into our scene? And we don't just want one, we want to have a whole bunch of them. So this is what we're going to do. First, I'm just going to go into sculpt mode and just put down a block over here. And then I'm going to put down another block over here. And what these are going to be is, this is where our enemies are going to spawn. And this is going to be where they want to get to. So this is their goal, essentially. If this was, for example, a tower defense, you might have like a little maze that leads them there. And then once we've got that, that'll be their sort of destination. Once they get there, they'll disappear, or If it was kind of like survival, they might just spawn and not have any goal in particular. They might just be running around and attacking the hero or something like that, you know. But how we will spawn them is, we will go to logic and processing. We will stick down a nice little microchip. Go into our microchip and we're going to put down an emitter, and we can call this emitter W1 for wave 1. And what are we going to emit? Let's go object to emit. Wave 1 will be this dude. We can move the little white bauble thingy, and we can change the emit speed to 0. So now you see, when there is an emit speed, it'll give you a little arrow, which means that's the direction they're going to be emitted in. But if you make it 0, it just becomes a simple ball, and that means they're just going to spawn there and appear there. Okay, next thing we're going to want to see is, time between emits. So we can change that. That's how often they're going to spawn. So we could make it like every 0.5 seconds one of these guys is going to spawn. Max emitted at once, you can set that to 0. But then max emitted, this is the number of enemies you're going to get. So for example, if you want 3 enemies to spawn, you can set max emitted to 3. Then it'll spawn 3 and it won't spawn anymore. Alrighty, so let's see what happens if we try it out now. There's 1 guy, 2 guys, 3 guys. They're actually all there. They just like all clipped into each other. But we don't just want them to be standing there, do we? So what we're going to do is edit our original wave 1 guy. But as we can see, he's disappeared. Where's he gone? When someone gets emitted, they're automatically made invisible. So we're going to go to show and hide, and we're going to go preview invisibility. Hey, we can see our guy again. Then we're going to scope into him, and we're going to add a little bit of a follower. So let me go into gadgets. Then I'm going to go into follower. And the follower is going to, where's it going to go though? Well, we want it to go to goal. So quickly, let's go into our gadgets, sensors and input, and we'll put down a tag. And we can call this tag goal. Whoops, goal. So now we have our goal tag, which is totally perfect. We're going to go to our follower. We're going to enter tag name. We're going to press down on the D-pad, and it's going to say goal. We're going to set strength of the follower to pretty high, make it 100%, and then you can adjust the speed as you see fit. Maybe 3 meters is good, 3 meters a second. So let's have a test. 1, 2, 3. Okay, they're going there. Woohoo! But what happens when they get there? They start freaking out. In this particular case, we actually want them to disappear. So like kind of die, that sort of a thing. As if they were going to a destination, and then, you know, if they were attacking your base, they'd like blow up when they got there or something like that. So for what we're going to do there is we're going to go to our trigger zone. We're going to make a little trigger zone. We're going to go things to detect, make it a tag, press down on the D-pad here so that it's goal. Then we're going to go to zone shape. We're going to make it kind of a little bit more in the middle of the body, make it a little bit smaller. And so when your little puppet moves and he gets to the point which is the goal, we want something to happen. And what we want to happen is that he disappears. So we're going to put down a destroyer. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So he goes, and then zoop, 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 they all get there. They get to their destination and they disappear. So we want this actually for all of our chaps. So what we can do is make a nice little microchip, and we can just select. We grab them with R2, we scope into the microchip with L1 and X, cha-ching, and it's all there. And now we can look at our other dudes, and we can just copy this with L1 and R2, copy just like that, and then for this guy as well, we can copy just like that. Alrighty. So now we've got our first wave, and we've set up our second and third waves in terms of their enemies, but we don't have any way to spawn the second and third wave. We've got wave 1, but if we just copied this and made it wave 2, then all of them would spawn simultaneously, which isn't what we want. So what we're going to do is use a selector. We'll make this canvas a little bit bigger, and wave 1 is going to be output A, so that's going to be the first thing the selector does. Then we want something to trigger the second wave beginning, and this is how we're going to do it. Okay friends, now we're going to get it a little bit funky, so stay with me. I'll take it slow, but we got this. Okay, so what we want to do is find out a way to trigger the next wave after the first wave is done. So there's a few ways you can do this. You could set it on a timer. So for example, you could say every minute or whatever, every second, 60 seconds, it's going to be wave 1, and then 60 seconds later it's going to be wave 2, and then 60 seconds later it's going to be wave 3. For that you just use a timer, which is quite simple. You would just connect it to the A, you would just do something like this. You would have a timer, set it to say 60 seconds, connect it to this, and then when it is done, timer finished, you would go move to next output. But often with survival games, for example, or tower defenses, the next wave will only begin when all the enemies from the previous wave have been destroyed, isn't it? And so what we're going to do for that is we'll have to do a little bit of funkiness, but if you bear with me and you watch the video and we take it slowly, we should be alright. So we're going to stick down a variable, and in this variable we're going to call it enemies remaining. Oh nice, enemies remaining. So we can set the minimum value to 0, because we're not going to have minus 1,000 enemies, are we? And for the max value, you can have, let's say, 100. Doesn't really matter this max minimum stuff at the minute, but yeah. Alrighty, so we have our little variable enemies remaining, and we're going to set the initial value to 1. Alrighty. Then we're going to have a number displayer, which is going to show how many enemies we have remaining. So we have our number displayer over here, and we'll connect the current value to the number range. Then for this, I think we'll just to make it unique, we'll make it a red one, so we know that's how many enemies we've got remaining. At the moment, it's saying 1. Alrighty. What we want to have now is a way to increase the amount of enemies depending on like how many enemies there actually are. So what we're going to do for that is go into our little puppet. We're going to go into our microchip, and what we're going to do is actually create something that will reduce the amount of enemies. First of all, we want to have something that will reduce the amount of enemies when they die, right? So we can have a variable modifier. That's going to change our variable. We'll scope into that, name a variable, down on the D-pad, and we'll select enemies remaining. And this is basically going to be when your enemies die, then it will reduce the amount of enemies remaining, which is what we want. So we're going to, rather counterintuitively, we're going to go to add, but you're thinking, why are we adding? Because we're actually, we're reducing it. Well, you're just going to add -1. So you're adding -1, so in other words, you're minusing by 1. And when does this happen? When you get to the trigger zone and when you die. If you're doing like a survival game and it's not based on some arbitrary like trigger zone, and you want them to want it to happen when they get killed, for example, what you would do is you would close this business and you would say when it's no health, then it would trigger this. So that's if you're like attacking your enemies and stuff. So when they have no health, then it will reduce the amount of enemies remaining. Alrighty? That's perfect. Let's see what happens. Let's actually just I'm actually just gonna delete these dudes for now, funnily enough, because otherwise they're all gonna start running. So here we are. Okay. Oh, well, it reduced, but it didn't actually say how many enemies we had in the beginning. But that's easy enough. What we do for that is, for wave 1, we're just going to add a variable modifier as well and connect it to A. And what this is going to do is press down the D-pad to get enemies remaining. It's going to set so the operation type is we're going to make it set it to 3, because that's the amount of enemies we have. Is it not? You can also use a value slider to connect the max emitted to the operation value. So you can just use a value slider and move that up and down. But yeah, for now this says the amount of enemies is 3. So let's see if it works. We've got 3 enemies. That's correct. And as they go down, the number goes down. Alrighty, perfect. So now we've got a way of actually counting how many enemies we've got and when they get reduced, when they disappear. But we want to now trigger the next wave. So what do? Well, here we get into some funkiness. For those of you who've done a little bit of programming and that sort of a thing, you'll think of if statements when I do this. But essentially what we're going to do is, when we're going to plug this into the A operand, or the A input, when enemies remaining is equal to 0, you can just leave that as it is, something is going to happen. This is our result. Okay, so when enemies remaining equals 0, what we want to do is move to the next output. Alrighty. So what this does is it'll go to B, which will be, for example, if we make it wave 2, let's make this wave 2. In wave 2 we want to have different enemies and so on and so forth, and we can bring those guys back now. But yeah, so we have wave 1, wave 2. It's going to be triggered when we go to when the enemies remaining equals to 0. Cha-ching! So let us go to our blank basic puppet. We've cloned him now, all that info he's got. Then we're going to, just like before, go to code mode, make this guy yellow. You can change his HP, whatever works for you. And he is going to be spawned here in wave 2. So let's see what happens. Actually, one thing we want to do also is, of course, clone our variable modifier. Of course, you can put all of this in a microchip, if that works for you. But let's do something here. For wave 2, we don't want to have just 3 enemies. We want to have 4 enemies. So max emitted, we'll increase that to 4. But remember, to, in your variable modifier, to increase that as well. Because otherwise you'll have 4 enemies spawning, but it'll only set it to 3, so you might have like -1 or whatever. But let's see if it works. So here we are, 1, 2, 3, and it says 3 here. Choop, choop, choop. Oh, they're dying. And then here, 4. Okay, 4 guys, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. So if you want to sort of add a little bit of a timer between, what you can do is, let us delete the connection between the calculator, which is doing our when it's equal to 0. Delete the connection between that and the next output. We're going to add a little intermediate point, which is going to be our timer. So gadgets, timer. And we'll say there's a 5-second gap, so we'll go results, connect that to the start timer. We'll have a 5-second pause, and then at the end of that 5-second pause, it's going to go to the next wave. So if, for example, if in your thing you had a little break between waves, your characters went to like buy stuff at a store, or upgrade their weapons or that sort of a thing, You give them a little bit of time. It could be 30 seconds, it could be 60 seconds. And we'll actually also just add a little bit of a timer, like a visual display of that. So we'll go another number displayer. We can go into our timer, and we're going to make it, we'll make it 5 seconds. We'll make current time max, then we'll go count down. So it's going to count down from 5 rather than count up to 5. And then we're going to, go back in there and go current time and connect that to the number range. So this is going to make a number range appear. Let's move where this little dude is, and we can change the color of it. Maybe make it yellow or something like that. So yes, indeed. Let's see what happens. Let us play. Well, not very well arranged, but yeah. So we've got our 3 enemies. 3, 2, 1, and our counter's timing is counting down. Our timer is counting down, and 4 enemies. Oh, and our timer is counting down once again. And then we can have our 3rd wave of enemies, we can have our 4th wave of enemies, we can have our 5th wave of enemies. That is pretty much it, friends. So for example, with wave 1 you can put the emitter and the variable in the microchip. You can do the same for wave 2, so it's nice and simple, so on and so forth. This variable, which is your enemies remaining, is essential for counting the amount of enemies. If you want to do something like when the previous wave all the enemies have been killed or whatever, then it will trigger the next wave rather than a timer. This is going to check when there are 0 enemies left, then it's going to start the timer and it will go to the next wave. Make sure friends that you go move to next output, and you don't say, for example, it connects to B or connects to C, because then you might like replay the same waves, that sort of a thing. So make sure that you've got it connected to move to next output. If we go over our little enemies again, their most important things are that they've got a follower, or whatever you want it to be. This follower you might connect to your protagonist, your hero, so that they move towards you. And make sure that you've got a variable modifier that reduces the enemies remaining when they die, because of this kind of whatever way they disappear. Like if they get to a point, they die and they reduce it by 1, or if their health gets reduced to 0, if it's like a fighty game, and that'll reduce it by 1 as well. So there you are, friends. That is the gist of making waves of enemies. You can keep increasing this for like a whole long time. And yeah, friends, you can have a bunch of waves, you can have a bunch of enemies. Works for tower defenses, works for survival games. I hope you found this useful, and I shall catch you on the flip-flop. Peace out, friends. Woohoo! Oh yeah. Peace out.